Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are having a good week so far and enjoying having a little bit less homework than usual for my class. Today, we are going to continue on this unit of why stories matter. So, as I mentioned a few days ago, we're starting at looking at what we have learned so far, and then we're going to next week be looking at a little bit more philosophical ideas about why stories matter or why our brains even gravitate towards things that are written in a story format. And then also we're going to be finishing up the unit with sort of looking at our stories, connecting what we've learned so far with sort of how we can live our lives and take something meaningful out of that. So today we are going to do a little bit of a recap of what we've read so far, and we are going to be just remembering some of the characters, plots, and themes. I was really interested in looking at your guys' 5-word summaries of each of the stories, and those are going to come up a little bit later. All right, so first of all, the first thing we started with this year was The Old Man and the Sea. I know that it was not all of your guys' favorite books, and that's okay, but it was definitely a really good entry point into understanding themes and maybe even a little bit more complicated of a plot structure. So we have Santiago, the old man, Manolin, the boy, and the marlin, right? And the basic plot is he hooks the fish is eaten by sharks, but he never gives up. And that's where we get into some of these themes. So when you guys were summarizing these books, a lot of you guys didn't just focus on the plot. You guys jumped right into some of those themes that we talked about: perseverance, endurance, his wisdom, being destroyed but not defeated, courage, things like that. This was also the book where we talked a little bit about stream of consciousness and looking at different writing styles and how even the way that Hemingway wrote his book helped us understand his themes better. Next, we got into The Miracle Worker by William Gibson. That was the play that we read all together. So this one is about Helen Keller and Annie Sullivan and how Annie helps Helen experience language. You also have Captain Keller, Mrs. Keller, and James Keller, her brother, in this story. So Helen, she's blind and deaf. Everyone has basically given up on her. They've stopped trying to discipline her and anything like that. But through perseverance and patience, Annie is able to reach Helen. She doesn't give up on her. She really believes in her, and she works to teach her something that other people didn't think was worth their time. When you guys were summarizing this story, you guys talked a lot about love, light, hope. Obviously, you have blindness, Helen, things like that. But specifically, a lot of you guys said that this story was inspiring or interesting, inspirational, things like that, which I thought was pretty interesting that so many of you found this story so engaging, which I think that's fun. Also, this is the one where you talked about the symbolism of light and how that can be sort of this idea of language or learning or understanding, which is one of the things that a lot of you guys also wrote about. We also had the landlady. I didn't include Gideon on here because we definitely spent more time talking about the landlady. The landlady, obviously, you have Billy and the landlady. Billy ends up at this bed and breakfast. The landlady seems nice. At first she seems super sweet, but like kind of weird. And then we find out that she stuffs people for fun and has poisoned Billy, presumably with the intention of adding him to her collection. Naturally, you guys all said that this was a very creepy story. But also, you guys talked about mystery. A lot of you picked up on the idea of foreshadowing and how that really contributed to this idea of the creepiness and the scariness and how weird it is. And it was a very engaging story. And part of that goes back to that foreshadowing. All right, we also have Night by Elie Wiesel. So in Night, there were obviously a lot of characters, but primarily what we had were Ellie and his father as they, were going through the camp. So during World War II, this is our first Holocaust book that we read this year. Ellie and his family, they're rounded up, sent to concentration camps. His mother and sisters die almost immediately. Ellie and his father, they stick together and they survive for quite a while. They suffer a lot physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And even though he's eventually rescued, there's a lot of pain in that novel. And naturally, then, a lot of you, sad was a word that came up a lot in your summaries. But you guys also talked a lot about hope and faith in combination with like pain and evil, even in the midst of the Holocaust. The Hiding Place, our second Holocaust novel by Corrie ten Boom. Primarily, we have Corey, Betsy, Nolly, Casper, the father, and I put the snake on here because she is also a character who's talked a lot about. She's one of the guards in Ravensbrück. Basic plot here: Corey and her family work with the Dutch underground to hide Jews from the Nazis. The Nazis have occupied the Netherlands. The family is caught, they're sent to prison, and eventually Corey and Betsy are sent to concentration camp. And a lot of you really emphasized this idea of Corey's faith. God and faith are the two words that came up the most, closely followed by family, Jews, trust, love, and once again, sad. So, especially coming out of Night, which I forgot to mention, you also mentioned dehumanization a lot. So, even coming out of that really, really tragic story of dehumanization, a lot of you in this book were able to see a lot more of the sort of hope that Corey has in God, even through intense dehumanization and really, really tragic events. All right, our most recent book, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I'm not going to talk about the plot of this one because I am sure you all just finished reading it. So for characters, we have Jem, Scout, Dill, Atticus, Miss Maudie, and Alexandra, the Missionary Circle, Tom Robinson, Boo Radley, Mr. Yule, Mayella. Obviously, once again, there are a lot of characters in this story. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why I've included lists of characters in this video. But for themes and things like that, you guys, obviously you have racism and then that sort of the tension between prejudice and innocence, right? You have the kids who sort of embody this innocence, the town and the prejudice, all of it sort of centering around the racism between Black versus white. We have hypocrisy, dehumanization came up again, integrity, injustice, mystery, perspective, interesting, love, hope, things like that, discrimination. So a lot of really important things that you guys pulled out of this story. So as a whole, when I put all of your guys' 5-word summaries together, this is sort of what it looks like. These are like the 100 most common words that came up when you put together all of the books. So obviously these are themes that we've talked about all year, right? Hope, perseverance, the creepy, obviously that comes from the landlady, dehumanization, love, faith, sort of the sadness of some of these stories, right? And you guys recognize that these stories are about more than plot. I was super impressed with your guys' ability to, when you summarize the stories, you didn't just tell me old man hooks fish. You gave me stuff about perseverance and endurance and stuff like that. I really, really enjoyed also reading through all of your explanations of why stories are important to you. Mr. Cho and I will be revisiting your answers on that Google form together next Tuesday, but I wanted to highlight a few things right now. One of those things is you guys talked a lot about how stories can take you out of sort of the boring, quote unquote, reality, and they can show you something different. You also talked about how stories could give you a glimpse into someone else's life, sometimes even creating a space for you to step into the shoes of the hero or the villain, if that's more your jam. So the themes that we've talked about, the words on this slide, they're not unique to the books that we have read in class this year. A lot of these things also show up in various forms in pretty much all of the stories that you said that you were interested in. So whether they be from books, movies, TV shows, songs, things like that. A lot of what we gravitate towards in our stories show up on this slide. So all of these things can really show us something beautiful or fascinating, or sometimes really something that's just challenging about what it means to be a human. And I'm even including the creepiness of the landlady in that. So next week, we are going to really dig into what it is about stories that makes them appealing. Both fiction, nonfiction, stories, shows, the whole caboodle. And tomorrow, you're going to be doing an activity that asks you to pick a specific character from something that we've already read this year. So if you need a refresher, you can go back and look at the earlier slides in this video. And you're going to tell me how you see yourself in them. A lot of you talked about how you like stories where you can empathize with a character, and I want you to look at what we've read and pick someone that you see yourself in. And it could be something positive or negative. I'll give you more instructions tomorrow, but I wanted to take a day right here to just recap what we've learned and not just talk about the plots and the characters, but also the themes and sort of the things that you guys have chosen to remember from these stories that go beyond just what happens in the book, because I think that is one of the coolest things about literature. So both aspects, the plot and the themes, are important to the last little project that I'm going to have you be doing this year. But we're just kind of taking this step by step. Thank you for trusting me as I sort of walk you through this discussion about why stories matter to the human experience. Have a great rest of your day, you guys.